Welcome everybody. Haven't done a video in a while, but today we're going to do a review of the July 1986 issue of Sports Review Wrestling. So here's the cover, as you see. Got Roddy Piper, the bare facts behind Paul Orndorff's humiliation of Roddy Piper. They have a section, the greatest matches of the 80s. Sheer violence in the UWF, the Sheepherders make tag team wrestling wild and woolly. And there's a sports review interview with Nick Bockwinkel. And then, of course, Tully Blanchard, Magnum TA and his fans can go to hell. I love this magazine. I love the cover because Piper and Orndorff, two of my favorite wrestlers. And then Magnum TA also. And the feud with Magnum and Tully Blanchard was insane. Also love the back here. Got Kerry Von Erich. I have that poster of the Road Warriors. Also have that fold out of Sergeant Slaughter, and there was a special Night of Dreams Wrestling Supercard with that round robin with Flair, Martel, and Hogan. So, this is the story, and so the bare facts behind Paul Orndorff's humiliation, Roddy Piper, you see in the story. You know, they kind of use a play on words there with Piper getting his tights pulled down by Orndorff. You know, one of the things about this feud, and I actually went to the Los Angeles Sports Arena and saw a match between Piper and Orndorff. I believe it was September of '85. Piper and Orndorff battled to it must have been a count-out victory for Orndorff, I think. And then Studd and Hogan were the main event. They were the semi-main. Really fun match. They really had some good fun matches. Remember Saturday night's main event? They had this wild brawl. They took it to the back. The one thing, though, with the Piper-Orndorff feud is it never really had a conclusion, a blow-off. They did wrestle some cage matches because I remember they wrestled a cage match at the sports arena. So I guess that was the blow-off. And with the WWF cage matches, you could lose and not lose face because of the exiting the cage rule as the way to victory. But there's another issue of Pro Wrestling Illustrated that says that what happened to this feud, that it fizzled out, right? Because when the Piper-Orndorff feud started, you kind of thought, well, this is going to be like Snuka Piper, this incredible heat. And it did start like that, but it kind of did fizzle out. And I'm thinking one of the reasons is that neither one of them really wanted to job to the other. You know, we know that Piper was very protective of his position in the promotion, and obviously Orndorff's just turned babyface, so he's the number 2 babyface after Hogan. And then you have Tully Blanchard, Magnum TA, and his fans can go to hell. Now this is after the I Quit match, and I gotta watch. Right now I'm going through 83 World Class, and then I'm going to go through 84. I already watched 85 and 86. And after that, I'm going to dive into World Championship Wrestling Mid-Atlantic around this time frame to relive the Tully Blanchard Magnum TA feud. Then you got the sheer violence in the UWF. The Sheepherders make tag team wrestling wild and woolly. Now, this is right after the Mid-South changed their name to the UWF because obviously they were, at this time in wrestling for younger fans that didn't grow up in the 80s, bigger was better at this time. Promotions were trying to sound more nationalistic. That's why you had Southeast change their name to Continental, Mid-South to UWF, World Class. They were already World Class, but they wanted their own world title. So that was kind of the way it was at this time. Bigger was better. Then this is one of my favorite parts of these of the After magazines was the ratings analysis. And here they talk about the name change of Mid-South to the UWF. And they say, last issue, this column discussed some major changes in the World Class area. This issue, there's another major change in the ratings, though not so far reaching as declaring a new world champion. Having looked at the ratings on the previous 2 pages, you may have noticed a category that was probably unfamiliar to you. UWF, that stands for Universal Wrestling Federation. And it's simply another name for what you've known all along as Mid South, the Mid South area. And apparently, this is Ken Mantell, who just joined the UWF, saying the name change is a logical extension of recent developments in the promotion of Mid South Wrestling, explained UWF executive Ken Mantell, who came to the organization from the world class area recently. The Mid South television program has been reaching more and more markets than ever before in the United States. We gained a few foreign markets, and we're negotiating to expand to many, many more over the next few months. And then he says we will also be entering into a series of co-promotions in 1986 and 87 with Jim Crockett Promotions and several Japanese promoters. Well, we know the cooperation with the UWF and Jim Crockett didn't last long. They did the Crockett Cup, which was a great card, but didn't get the attendance that they probably expected for the Superdome. And they ran a show at the Dallas Reunion Arena. I think they only got 6,000 there, I'm sure, which would have been disappointing. And basically, the UWF wasn't long. They went out of business, or they sold. Watts sold to Crockett in May of '87. Now, by the time I started watching UWF, my impression of it was that it was just like world class retreads. I had started watching world class in early '85, and so I just thought, oh, this is world class retreads. I wasn't really too impressed with it. And even going back, I loved Mid-South Wrestling. But I really thought that shortly after they changed the name to the UWF, and not because of that change, it has nothing to do with it. I think there was, they had a few good months. You know, the Freebirds came in. But I think by, the fall of '86, it was pretty much a shell of its former self. So it was definitely better during the Mid-South years. So let's see here. They have the ratings, of course. I love the old format of the ratings with all the different promotions. This is pretty cool. Stan Hansen, there's AWA World Champion. And they have Flair number 1, Hogan number 2, Hansen number 3, Magnum TA number 4, Randy Savage 5, Dusty Rhodes, then Kerry Von Erich, Rick Rude, Tully Blanchard, Hacksaw Duggan, who was North American champion. Now this is about half a year, because the deadline here is April 9th, 1986. This is about half a year after PWI and the Aftermags relented and re-recognized the WWF title as a world title. So, what else here? Then they have the special section, the greatest matches. And of course, they're doing it from the PWI perspective, which would be it would be matches that had some kind of cachet that were important in the wrestling world. So 1980, for example, they have Bockwinkel, Gagne winning the world title from Bockwinkel, Comiskey Park, which was probably, I heard it was not a good match. Bruno versus Larry Zbyszko in the cage, obviously probably the greatest feud. One of the top 3 greatest feuds in the 80s. That angle. Dusty versus Bob Backlund in Japan. That's pretty cool to put that there. And then Hogan and Andre, a match between them. So, stuff like that. So they do this section, greatest matches. Snuka Backlund, 82. You see there? Now, the Snuka Backlund cage match, I had heard about it so much from the magazines. Because I started watching wrestling the year after, 1983. And saw Backlund, Snuka Morocco, and I heard so much about Backlund Snuka that this match for me had carried mythic proportions. So I finally got to watch it in around '94. I got it videotape, and I loved it. I thought that was a better match than the Morocco Snuka, although Morocco Snuka slightly better finish because Snuka hit the Superfly. Great finish in '82 though, Snuka missing the Superfly, and I had heard for so long that Snuka got a lot of cheers in that match, and I honestly Backlund overwhelmingly got the cheers from the fans there. He was super over. I think a lot of people try to rewrite history about Backlund. Then you have this article, We Accuse. I used to love these articles, and it has Bill Fralick. And basically, kayfabe obviously talking about how a lot of the pro football players didn't take the Battle Royal seriously, and they got embarrassed in the Battle Royal. They give kudos to William Perry though, who they say took it seriously and did okay. So yeah, Bill Fralick. This is a guy I believe that could have had a great career in pro wrestling after his football career. He had his interviews that he did leading up to the battle royal, and I thought like he had the charisma, he had the look. I think Bill Fralick would have been a great pro wrestler. Let's see what else here. They have the Tadler where they cover like different house shows. There you got Hogan and Bundy, and this one's the WrestleMania 2 match. I think Mania 2 just happened after this episode. I mean, this issue of Sports Review Wrestling came out. Let's see what else here. Yeah, they cover Piper versus T at the Nassau Coliseum. You see the picture there. Which was Mr. T's kind of final hurrah of being kind of in the limelight and fame. So, yeah, this is Sports Review Wrestling. What else do we have here? They have the matches, the letters from the fans. Oh, here, Wrestler of the Month, British Bulldogs. They won the WWF title. If you think about the British Bulldogs, their run as WWF champions was kind of disappointing because, the injury to Dynamite Kid. My favorite WWF Tag Team Champions were Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo. But the British Bulldogs, they're great, don't get me wrong. And then remember, they had this section, they asked the wrestlers a question of the month. Got Adrian Street there, Missy Hyatt, Rick Rude, Rick Martel. Let's see what Rick Martel has to say. The question of the month is, if you hadn't become involved in wrestling, what would you be doing? Rick Martel says, allegedly, of course, kayfabe. I've tried my hand at ice hockey. I had two heroes growing up in Quebec, Edward Carpentier and Rocket Ricard. I always dreamed of skating around the Montreal Forum with the Stanley Cup held high over my head. I played junior hockey for several years, but after my first taste of the ring, I knew there was no turning back. Sometimes I kid around by saying that there's less violence in a brutal wrestling match than there is in a normal hockey game. Of course, that's changed now because hockey's gotten watered down in that area, but then, of course, the mailbag. The mailbag here. So, speaking of Rick Martel, this person, John Reed from Houston, writes, he shall return. In the story in April 1986 issue of Sports Review Wrestling, Quitter, the label haunts Rick Martel, was manufactured garbage, the writer, this fan says. Anyone who has followed the career of Rick Martel knows the last thing the proud Canadian is a quitter. Martel's spirit has been a constant source of inspiration to his fans and friends. No one is perfect. Martel's back injuries have been well documented. That is why Hansen was able to defeat him that night in New Jersey. Had Martel not submitted, he would have spent the rest of his life in a wheelchair. Now, 5 months later, it is a healthy and vigorous Rick Martel who appears in the ring. He promised us he would regain the AWA title, and we believe he will. I know that Martel will keep his promise and regain what is rightfully his. I started watching AWA. I remember it was just a couple weeks after the first WrestleMania. On KTLA Channel 5, we had Pro Wrestling USA, and immediately Rick Martel was my favorite world champion. I'd seen Ric Flair briefly on WTBS, and I didn't like Hogan, so Rick Martel immediately became my favorite world champion. And I really thought the AWA should have kept him as world champion longer. He should have been their guy for the 80s, and I know that wouldn't have changed the eventual result of Vince defeating the AWA, but at least would have kept the AWA better longer. He had the look. A lot of people talk about his interview skills, but you know what? As a babyface, he could have just had these serious sports type of interviews, and you bring in Hills like they kind of did with Backlund or Revolving Dory Hills. But yeah, here again, going back to this Magnum TA and Tully Blanchard, man, that's one of the best feuds of the 80s right there. And it's a shame what happened to Magnum because he would have got the plans were Starcade '86 was to give him the title, the U.S. title. He was gonna have a final blow off from Nikita Koloff, and then I believe he would have won the world title at Starcade '87. That would have been the big crowning achievement for him, and then maybe he would have traded with Flair uh, the title a couple times. So yeah, this is a Sports Review Wrestling. Again, great. It was one of my favorite magazines out of the After Mags. And what I loved about the ratings back then, because back then I would get World Class on Channel 56 KDOC, in Los Angeles UHF. I'd get Worldwide on Channel 56 Worldwide Wrestling, which was NWA UHF. I'd get AWA and KTLA Saturday mornings. I'd get WWF Saturday morning Championship Wrestling, KJLH, I think, and then also the All Star Show from WWF at Saturday night. And I was watching AWA and ESPN when I could because I didn't have cable. I'd go to my dad had cable, and I'd be in there every other week. But yeah, man. And so seeing all these other promotions that I didn't get to see on TV, like Continental, Northwest, Florida, Mid Southern, UWF. So I would just like be interested every month in seeing the ratings. I was really big into the ratings. Like here in the tag team section, the Road Warriors are number 1, the British Bulldogs 2, and the Midnight Express 3. You got the Fabulous Ones, which is my favorite tag team, number 7. You know, Scott Hall and Kurt Hennig and AWA World Tag Team Champions, number 4. So that's it. I have a ton of magazines. I'll be doing more of these type of reviews, plus reading from old observers. All right, guys. Thank you. Bye.